A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Thank you so much for tuning in to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. As promised, we're going to get to a lot of your emails over the course of the next few minutes. But I do have a special guest. I was intending on today's program being all about your emails and your questions and your comments, but I had the opportunity to speak with Pennsylvania State Senator Mario Scavello about an issue that popped up. I wrote about this at Bearing Arms on Thursday. Governor Tom Wolf in Pennsylvania sent a letter out to every lawmaker with a yearbook, a quote unquote yearbook attached. And this yearbook is actually it's basically a book of the 37 individuals who were killed in shootings at schools or on school grounds in 2018. And Governor Wolf basically told lawmakers, look at these names, look at these faces, look at these stories, and then ask yourself, do you really want to just sit by and do nothing instead of passing, quote unquote, common sense gun safety laws to protect students at school? He talked about how he's heard from parents and teachers and students who are freaked out about going to school, and lawmakers need to do something, right? And then, according to Senator Scavello, Governor Wolf is planning on pulling tens of millions of dollars out of a grant fund established by the state specifically for school security. That's right. So on the one hand, Governor Wolf says you got to pass these gun control bills if you care about kids. On the other hand, he's saying, and as when it comes to school security, but these school districts, they don't need all of this criminality. They don't need these cameras. They don't need these physical upgrades. What we need instead are red flag laws and other gun control measures. Well, as you can imagine, Senator Scavello and a lot of other lawmakers are pretty ticked off at what the governor is doing. And I did have the opportunity to speak with Senator Scavello for a few minutes. Take a look and a listen. Senator, thank you so much, sir, for coming on the program. It's great talking with you today.
Great to be here.
I've got to ask you, I saw that your social media post talking about Governor Wolf, the letter that he had sent to you and I guess several other lawmakers.
Every lawmaker.
Every lawmaker got this letter. And a copy of this, was it the yearbook of 2018, highlighting those lives lost to school shootings, which I...
one of the most...
Go ahead, Senator.
It was one of the most disingenuous things that I've ever seen. First of all, spend the money to send that book out. We're all aware of this, who cares. We're all aware of it. It's not like we got kindergarten people here. We live this every day. We're well aware of it. But what gets me is he sends this out, and the same day that he sent this out, he cuts $50 million out of the funding for school safety. It's almost like he's forcing you to do anti-gun laws. That's the way the only thing I can see. Because, to me, it's about school safety. That's what the issue should be, and keep it there. But he takes the money away from that line.
Well, I think a lot of folks have that same impression. I mean, on the one hand, Governor Wolf's talking about how important school safety is. On the other hand, he's stripping this school safety grant fund of, I should say, 75% of what Republicans had requested. So I'm going to ask Senator, what is this money used for? I know that it's a school safety grant fund, but what does it actually go towards?
Well, the schools can entranceways, cameras, so when somebody comes into their building, they're not walking right into that hallway. They can they walk into an area that's protected until they're let in. They can't just open up a front door and walk in. It helps them with cameras, and if they need any security in the building, any security measures in the building, it would fund as well. That's based off of what the police, when they do an audit in that school, would make their recommendations, and these dollars would go to take care of those issues.
And so
I leave it up to the professionals when they go into a school to look at it. And that's what these dollars are for.
And so if these schools can't get access to that funds, many of them, I'm guessing, just simply won't have another way of improving the physical security there on campus.
Correct. And for many of these schools, right now, they're struggling with high property taxes. So this is a reason more so because especially in my area, with growing areas where they're struggling with high property taxes. And this here helps them fill a critical need without having to take it out of their operating.
All right, and so the governor says, well, these schools don't apparently need that money. Has he given any reason why he wants to strip, $50 million?
No. I got to tell you, this isn't the only thing in this budget that bothers me. He's got it. I called this the worst budget in the 17 and a half years that I've been in Harrisburg. So disingenuous. It's like a bait and switch, and this was like when he sent that letter with that yearbook. After he presented that budget, that was it for me. I said, that's it. I just shook my head. I said, I can't believe that this guy is really thinking about the people of these school districts. How much does he really care? What does he want to do? And it's wrong. It's absolutely wrong.
So what are the gun control bills that he wants Republican lawmakers to pass instead of allowing these schools to actually physically improve the security there?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly because he deals in generalities.
There was no specific legislation mentioned in the letter that he sent to lawmakers.
Exactly. So it's just that he thought it's the wrong place. First, we approved this last year. We need to continue to make sure that our schools are safe. That's number one.
Mm-hmm.
And not to do that and to cut the funds from and then send this letter out is like all of us are really shaking our heads. We couldn't believe it. So a lot of my friends tweeted it, that people that my other senators that received it. I just chose to put it out there because I wanted people to read it and see it. I'm going to try to do something with my newspaper also because you just can't do something like this. It's wrong.
Well, I'm glad that you're listen. I'm glad that you're putting some sunlight on this because I think that Pennsylvanians across the state are going to be very upset at the disingenuousness and the duplicity of the governor calling for the protection of students on one hand while stripping these funds away on the other. So I guess the next question I have for you, Senator, is does the governor actually have any power to strip these funds? Republicans are in control of the legislature. The governor can propose these things, but does he have a line item veto? Can he simply axe whatever he wants?
Very good question. Very good question. We're not going to let him get away with it because we're not going to strip it. The Appropriations Committee hearings, and I'm on Appropriations, starts in 10 days. And that's where we're going to get to the meat of this whole budget because there's a tremendous amount of issues, that I have with his budget. He speaks one story and then does that. Career technical school. That's the way to go. And I believe it. You got to teach, give our students an option. I hope I'm not just jumping to another spot, but I'm just going to give our students an option. So because not every student is going to go to college, let's teach him a trade so that he can walk out of that technical school, go right into the trade as an apprentice, making $35,000-$40,000 without any debt. That's what I wanted to see. You know what I'm saying? So guess what? Not one extra dollar goes in the budget. Not one extra dollar. Then the other thing is he's going to fix. He's going to borrow $1 billion to address the asbestos issues and mold in some of our schools. Schools that have not addressed this over the period of years. How about the schools that the local people have paid for it out of their taxes and to get rid of their asbestos, get rid of their mold, and all of mine have, right?
Mm-hmm.
They took it out of local taxes. So he's going to reward the ones that have it with grants to do and pay 100% of it. When you do that, it's my schools that are going to be paying, my taxpayers are going to be paying into areas that haven't addressed the issue.
Yeah.
Address the issue, that's what they're supposed to do. It's like being Santa Claus, but at the same time, hurting the people that have done the job.
It reminds me of Elizabeth Warren. I think it was a couple of weeks ago when a gentleman asked her about her plan for free college, and he said, "Well, what about what about me? You know, I paid for my kids to go to college. Do I get my money back? And she said, well, of course not.
Yeah.
And it's that same attitude, right? So those districts that did the responsible thing, those districts that dealt with this issue, and as you say, took out maybe local bonds, they're now going to be, those taxpayers are now going to be on the hook not only for fixing the problems in their district, but fixing the problems in other districts that didn't deal with this issue.
Yeah. And by the way, that billion is going to be borrowed, so it's not going to be $1 billion. It's depending on what the payback is. It's going to be much, much more. I'm just like, and then he has one of the superintendents, of course, that has at his budget presentation that has some of these schools. You know, you just can't, the stuff. You know, it was just tough for me to sit there, and you know, I'm not like this. I usually try to work with the administration, regardless Republican or Democrat. But this was one of, and I started my comment. There's a video that you probably can see, and I picked his budget apart. But when I received this letter, that was the last straw. I said, I got it. It's got to end.
So I've got to ask. I know that you said that you and Republicans are going to make sure that this money stays there. The school safety grant fund.
My God, yes. You can't. There's no way that we can allow him to do that.
What can you tell me and what can you promise gun owners about their Second Amendment rights in this legislative session? Are Republicans going to stand firm and in support of the right to keep and bear arms?
I will tell you this. We are strong behind the Second Amendment. And we're not going to waffle. We're not waffling. I am a strong supporter, and that's probably one of the reasons, most reasons why I put that up there, because he's not telling you why he did it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I want people to know that it's like a bait and switch. You know?
Yep.
I'll take the $50 million out, and if we don't have the money for school safety, then what's the next thing we have to do? To take your guns, right?
Well, yeah. And Senator, again, I appreciate you standing strong against those games with our public safety because we shouldn't see politics played with our public safety in our schools and on our streets. And I hope we can continue to chat during the legislative session. But I appreciate your time today.
Yeah, you have my number. It's my cell phone. Just give me a call whenever you have an issue. Okay?
Appreciate it. Thank you so much, Senator Mario Scavello, joining us here on Bearing Arms Cam and Company. Now, in Virginia, we've got some stuff going on, including a vote on House Bill 961, a committee vote in the House Public Safety Committee that is expected on Friday. It's still a lot of things up in the air about this bill from what I'm hearing from folks at the Capitol. You still have 4 Democrat state senators who are opposed to the current language of House Bill 961, which would ban all quote-unquote assault weapons, magazines over 10 rounds, suppressors, trigger activators. Individuals who currently own these banned firearms would be permitted to register themselves and their firearms with the Virginia State Police, but no new quote-unquote assault weapons would be able to be purchased or even brought into the state if you move to Virginia. And there is no grandfather clause for magazines or suppressors or trigger activators. This bill faces a deadline. It's got to cross out of the House and over into the Senate by Tuesday, February 11th. So Democrats are running out of time. They're bypassing the subcommittee. They're bringing this straight to the House Public Safety Committee. I still think that this bill is likely to change, but it is also likely to face a tough uphill fight in the state Senate and possibly even in the state House as well. So make sure that you're reading BearingArms.com, and following here, we'll give you more information on Monday's Bearing Arms Cam and Company. As we turn to some of our emails, we'll actually start with a question from Rick in Virginia, who wonders about a bill, House Bill 568. It's a bill by Dan Helmer, who's an anti-gun delegate from Northern Virginia, the guy who introduced the bill that would have banned the NRA range from operating. Rick says, do you think that Helmer's Bill 568 is the first step to erode or eliminate open carry in Virginia? This would prohibit the open carrying or the carrying of firearms in a motor vehicle. provides that, quote, any person possessing or storing a firearm in a motor vehicle or vessel shall secure such firearm in a locked container other than a glove box that is not within the dominion and control of or readily accessible for prompt and immediate use by any person in the motor vehicle. There are exceptions for cops, licensed security guards, military personnel, or those with a concealed carry license. It could be, Rick, that this is one of those bills that is a first step bill. And I have no doubt that Delegate Helmer would love to go after our ability to carry. Now, again, I just mentioned the crossover deadline, which is coming up February 11th. So just looking at the legislative history for House Bill 568, it was referred to the Committee on Public Safety, the House Committee on Public Safety, back on January the 6th. It has not received a hearing to date. So much like House Bill 961, if it is going to cross over, if it is going to start moving, it's going to have to start moving pretty fast. But we know that the right to carry is something that Virginia Democrats are already interested in, right? They're already looking at, in fact, they're already considering legislation that would ban, well, not ban, but it would remove NRA certified safety courses for concealed carry licenses and basically make it impossible for individuals to get the training that they need to get a concealed carry license in the state of Virginia. Now, that bill is moving. As a matter of fact. And so, yeah, we know that they're going after the right to carry, and they'll do it piece by piece. You know, no state in the country has ever repealed shall issue right to carry. The right to carry revolution has moved in one direction and one direction only, towards that recognition of the right to bear arms. You have not had a state that has gone from no carry to may issue to shall issue to constitutional carry that has stepped back and said, wait a second, that was a mistake. But Virginia could be the first one. Virginia could be the first to try to put may issue laws on the books, and we haven't seen legislation like that this year. But I would not put anything past these anti-gun lawmakers, particularly those House lawmakers in Virginia. John, also writing from Virginia, says, as you know, I watch your show every day, and I wanted to focus on the stories about armed citizens. He says, in these stories, it seems like the bad guy is always a felon with a gun who was released and should not have been. Who holds the judges accountable for these cases? How is it that they can just release someone who's dangerous and there are no consequences for that judge? John says if someone drives recklessly and hits somebody, they're accountable. If a person was to have a negligent discharge that hurt somebody, they would be held accountable. I think our judges have become too powerful and believe that they are above the public and that they do not have to answer to anyone. I think if judges, he says, were to be tried for negligence in these cases where a felon was released early and they hurt somebody, we would then see people locked up for the duration. Great show. As always, says John, glad to know you and wish you all the best for the two of you moving forward. Fingers crossed. And John, thank you so much, man. It was so good getting to see you at SHOT Show. John works with Nemo Arms and lives here in the state of Virginia. And it was fantastic getting a chance to see you, John. Now, as for your question, so there are a couple of things. I actually started out as a beat reporter in Oklahoma City. Well, that was my first reporting job, was as a beat reporter. I started out as a master control operator. Honestly, that was my first job in television. I hit the button that made the commercials play. And then I went into, I was a videographer for a while, was a director, and then made the transition over into news. But courts and cops was one of my first beats that I had to cover. And so I got to see close hand the general lack of reporting that goes on with a lot of these cases. So you wonder why the judge, can get away with releasing these individuals. First of all, because most of the press doesn't pay attention to these stories. And if they do pay attention to these stories, it's always just sort of a casual aside of, oh yeah, the suspect had a lengthy criminal history, right? And so we don't do a good job as the media, and the public doesn't do a good job of focusing on what actually happens in these individual cases and how often violent criminals get slaps on the wrist and then are sent on their merry way. But the other problem with this is that this is the criminal justice system. This is how the system works these days. 97% of felony cases are pled down. They don't go to trial. There is no opportunity for a jury to convict an individual, to send them away for the maximum amount of time allowed under law, because the jury never hears the case. Instead, a prosecutor offers the defense attorney a plea bargain here. If your client pleads guilty to these 3 charges, we'll drop these 5 charges. And instead of doing 30 years, they'll get sentenced to 10 and they'll do 5. And just your client find that acceptable. Fine, yeah, sure, absolutely. That's what happens in the vast majority of these cases. So you can go after judges, and certainly there are times where, you can look at a case and the judge had the discretion to set a high bond or to hold somebody without bail, and they refuse to do so. And I think judges absolutely should be called out when that happens. But we also have to take a look at the system itself. And the fact is, the system is not designed to ensure that every one of these violent offenders gets their day in court. The system is designed to speed these individuals through the system as quickly as possible. And the system would grind to a halt if all of these cases ended up going to trial, if a jury heard these cases. And so I think that this is a huge issue. And it's a complicated issue, and it's probably going to be an expensive issue, and politicians don't want to deal with it. It's easier for a politician to say, well, we need to do something, and we're going to pass universal background check laws, or we're going to ration handgun purchases to 1 a month, rather than actually deal with a crisis that is taking place in our criminal justice system. And I would say, by the way, we have a similar crisis in our mental health system as well. Politicians don't want to deal with that either. Rob, writing in from California, talking about President Donald Trump. He says one of Trump's greatest strengths is that his opponents think that he is dumb. Reagan had the same thing happen with him. They thought he was a washed-up actor, became the governor of California out of sheer luck. And Trump, says Rob, never having held any elected position before, was believed to be doubly incompetent. And when this man, who has not been corrupted by the Washington culture, took the reins of power, the establishment collectively gasped in horror, and they've been dropping onto their fainting couches ever since. This is especially so because his enormous success has made their corruption and impotence manifest to the world. The worst thing you can do to a megalomaniac, says Rob, is to embarrass them. And Trump does that every day by being an effective leader. It's why they hate him so much. The elite don't see America as a country, but in much the same way as George Orwell's Animal Farm, a thing to be exploited for personal gain. As closet globalists, they hold no allegiance to anyone but themselves, perhaps to those individuals whom they have pledged their fealty. Trump is not dumb, says Rob. He's a patriot. And it's sad that so many don't see the difference. Rob, I rarely do get into, purely political discussions here on Cam and Company, but I do think that you're onto something when you talk about the underestimating of Donald Trump. I confess, when Donald Trump was running for president in 2016, as a broadcaster, as a guy who makes a living talking into a microphone, there were times when I would listen to Donald Trump and my eyeballs would start twitching, and I found it difficult to get beyond the way he talks sometimes. And I think that is actually a huge part of or at least it was back in 2016. I think that was a huge part of the media dislike for Donald Trump. Is that guy? He's incredibly popular, but man, he sounds stupid, right? He sounds like a moron. And here we are now getting into 2020. If anybody thinks that Donald Trump is dumb, I don't know where they've been for the last 3 years, because, the working theory would then be that he's just sort of like stumbling his way through the presidency, and, an improving economy and all of these things. I don't see it. I don't. But I tell you what, in the wake of the impeachment vote, the acquittal vote in the Senate, and where we are right now heading into the 2020 election, I'm deeply concerned about where we are as a nation and the outright hatred that so many Americans feel towards their fellow Americans, and it's on both sides. And I believe the divide is. And I wasn't around in the 60s, Rob. I know that you were, so correct me if I'm wrong. But as an amateur student of history, I think this nation is more deeply divided than perhaps any time since the Civil War. And, the division back then was basically over one issue. Right. It was basically over slavery. I mean, there were other ancillary issues as well about federal government power versus state government power. But ultimately, that was the dividing line. Should you be able to own other human beings? Right. That was it. Think about all of the issues in which we see these deep divisions these days. Yes, the Second Amendment is certainly one of them. You've got a large block of one of the major political parties. In fact, I would say the dominant block of one of the major political parties that says and believes it really isn't a right at all. That the Supreme Court got it wrong in the Heller decision, that you don't have a right to keep and bear arms, and they want to turn that right into a privilege by any means possible. And then you've got another block, probably the dominant voting block of the other political party, that says, no, it is a right. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, and we're going to block anything that we believe would infringe on that right to keep and bear arms. There's not a lot of middle ground to be found there. If you can't even agree that it's a right, what sort of middle ground can you find? My hope and my belief as an incurable optimist is that Americans, not politicians generally and not pundits generally, but Americans are still somewhat persuadable. At least some of us are. And if you look at the changing attitudes, for instance, towards the Republican Party or even Donald Trump's personal approval rating, I think that people are changing their mind about the president. And I think people are changing their mind about the current Democrat Party. You know, ideally, as a gun owner and as a Second Amendment supporter, I would love it if our right to keep and bear arms was a nonpartisan issue. If you had a majority of Republicans and a majority of Democrats all on board and on the same page when it comes to protecting our right to keep and bear arms, that's the best outcome. Again, speaking from a purely Second Amendment perspective, it's a little concerning to have to put all of your eggs in one party's basket and say, okay, this is the party that's going to protect my rights. I believe that we need to be doing outreach with the left. I believe that we absolutely need to be promoting pro-gun Democrats. I happen to be a conservative, but I can disagree with somebody 90% of the time. And if they're a Second Amendment supporter, well, I'm going to at least wish them well. I might not vote for them if there's another Second Amendment supporter who I agree with more. But I'm not going to reject somebody who has a pro-Second Amendment point of view, at least not outright. You know, I do believe we need to find ways to work I don't was going to say work together, but we do need to find ways to increase the number of pro-gun politicians on both sides of the aisle. Because I think that's when gun owners really do start to win, when we are able to make the Second Amendment a nonpartisan issue. Let's see. Also, a email from Matt in Colorado. Actually, a link to a story that he sent me out of Aurora, Colorado. This is from Fox 31. Aurora police focusing on violent criminals getting guns off the streets. Well, that's good. I mean, it's better than focusing on legal law-abiding gun owners, I suppose, right? Aurora Police Department Metro Division Chief Terry Brown says protecting the public is really what it comes down to. They created a violent crimes task force this week, hoping that singling out certain criminals will have a ripple effect in addressing crime in Colorado. Since 2014, by the way, check this out. So 2013, Colorado passes gun control laws in the wake of the Aurora shooting at the theater. Universal background checks, ban on magazines over 20 rounds, over 15 rounds. And there was a big backlash to that. Now, since then, in Colorado, violent crimes increased. Violent crimes up 25%, at least through 2018. Could be even higher when you look at the 2019 figures. But Fox 31 reports since 2014, in other words, since the year after these gun control laws went into effect, guns used in the commission of crimes in Aurora have gone up 84%. 84% after these gun control laws were put in place. Fox 31 says historically a large percentage of the guns recovered by the department are stolen. Police will target groups that are stealing guns or buying them in bulk to sell to gangs. Some of the guns they recover actually come from the community, generally stolen out of people's homes or people's cars, which is why police stress the importance of responsible gun owners securing their firearms. And absolutely, that's great. On the other hand, Shouldn't we be focusing more on the people who are breaking into other people's cars and stealing their stuff? Shouldn't we be encouraging them to not do that? I think we should be encouraging them to not do that. And the gun control laws that then Governor John Hickenlooper, who is now running for Senate in Colorado, swore would keep the people of Colorado safe, have not done that at all. Violent crime is up. Aurora, Colorado, which again, the impetus for the passage of those gun control laws in 2013 in Colorado was the shooting in Aurora. And since then, since the passage of those gun control laws, the number of firearms or the percentage of crimes in which guns are used has nearly doubled. How about that? All right. Last email for you from Steve. Actually, I tell you what, Steve, I'm going to hang on to your email for just 1 second because I do have an armed citizen story of the day, and I have a recidivist report of the day. But Steve is going to be my good deed of the day. So we're gonna get back to you, Steve. Let us talk, however, about our recidivist report from Minneapolis, Minnesota, where an aide to Mayor Jacob Frey has been arrested and charged with gun and drug offenses. The 28-year-old, as you see there, had been offered a job by the mayor after his previous release from prison. This comes from bringmethenews.com. Keegan Rolink, 28 years of age, stopped by police after running a stop sign in Minneapolis on Sunday evening. When they searched his car, they found a loaded handgun with a live round in the chamber, a quantity of suspected cocaine in a backpack. Tests later confirmed that the substance was cocaine. Police also found a spiral notebook that included a list of names under the title "Owe Me," along with a digital scale and more than $2,200 in cash. Whoopsie. Rolink's story has been covered extensively in the Minneapolis press since 2016, when the Minneapolis Star-Tribune ran a feature talking about how he had been sentenced to a year in solitary confinement. After he was released from prison, Rolink met with the Minneapolis mayor. Bring Me the News says the pair struck up a friendship. The mayor was impressed by his efforts to turn his life around after his release. He initially tried to get a real estate license, was denied due to his previous felony convictions, and then Frey offered him a $15 an hour role as a policy fellow working on housing and economic inclusion offices in the mayor's office. Rolink started that job last month. He was actually supposed to appear alongside the mayor at an event on Tuesday, the day after his arrest. The mayor told the local paper that he was, quote, totally gutted to learn of his arrest, saying, quote, if the allegations are true, the disappointment is cavernous. Rolink's previous convictions include two for drug offenses, one for a drive-by shooting, and third-degree assault, for which he is on probation. Now, again, I bet we could go back and we could find some comments about the Minneapolis mayor going after and criticizing legal law-abiding gun owners, right? Chances are. The need to go after and impose new restrictions on those Americans who are exercising their constitutional rights. And look, I'm all in favor of second chances. I really am. Once somebody gets out of prison and they've done their time, I do believe that they need to be able to start their life back up again. If they can't find a job, if they can't re-enter society, then chances are they're going to go back and revert to a life of crime. So I believe that it benefits the public to help ensure that those who've been convicted of offenses and have done their time can re-enter society. Now, having said that, in this particular case, Mr. Rolink had a job. The mayor gave him a job. And apparently that wasn't enough to keep Mr. Rolnik from allegedly re-entering his life of crime. So maybe in the future, Mayor Frey can be a little less critical of legal law-abiding gun owners and maybe a little more critical of individuals like Mr. Rolnik there. All right. So that is our recidivist report. How about our armed citizen story of the day from the Lone Star State of Texas, where a homeowner shot a suspected burglar at a Houston home in northeast Houston. It was 1:30 or so Thursday morning. Houston Police Department responded to the 800 block of Caprone, found a man shot in the back. Homeowner said that earlier in the evening he had heard a noise, and when he went to investigate, he found the guy reaching into his home where the AC unit happened to be. Homeowner says he went to the front of his home, retrieved a pistol. Homeowner confronted the alleged burglar and then shot him. Police say the suspect is expected to survive. No other further information has been released. The investigation does continue, but right now looks like a case of self-defense there in Houston, Texas. We'll try to keep an eye on that story and bring you any more details on Monday if they are available. All right, let's now get to our good deed of the day. And as I said, this is from Steve, who wrote in just with a nice little note. Said, Cam, I just want you to know my family's praying for your wife and your family. Thanks for keeping us all informed and up to date on all things 2A. That was for Steve in Max Meadows, Virginia. Which, by the way, Steve, first of all, thank you very much for the email. And I want to talk more about that. Secondly, I've always been curious about something, and you're the first person I've actually met from Max Meadows, Virginia. I've seen the signage. How did Max Meadows become Max Meadows? That sounds like a guy's name, not a place in Virginia. But if you know the background on that, let me know, because I'm so curious. Ever since I've lived in Virginia, I've seen that. And Rural Retreat is another one that I just think is kind of an unusual name, but at least that doesn't sound like somebody's name. Max Meadows sounds like somebody you'd buy a car from, doesn't it? Come down to Max Meadows Motors. Anyway, if you know how the town came up with this name, Steve, please let me know. And thank you sincerely for reaching out via email and sending your kind thoughts. The good deed of the day, typically we talk about somebody being in the right place at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. Well, that's Steve. This is a tough day. As I mentioned on yesterday's program, I'm actually pre-taping Friday's Bearing Arms Cam and Company. I'm at the doctor's with my wife. We're trying to figure out what our next steps are in terms of her fight against lung cancer. And it's been about a 3.5-year journey here. I've had about 8 months where we thought that she was free and clear of her cancer. Besides that, it's been a lot of chemotherapy, a lot of immunotherapy, clinical trials, hair loss. And, I'm a pretty incurable optimist. I know that my wife is in the fight. She is going to stay in the fight. There are new treatments that are coming online, it seems, almost every day. So there is every reason to be optimistic. But when you're faced with that unknown, it's been 3 months since my wife's been on any sort of treatment, and she went in for her CT scan. We know that her tumors have grown, but as I'm recording this here, I don't know how big they've grown. I don't know if there are more. I don't know if the cancer has spread outside of her lungs to other parts of her body. And you try not to dwell on these things. You try not to think about these things, but you can't help it when somebody that you love so dearly is going through something like this. And you have to be the Rock, not the actor, although my wife would love it if I were the Rock. But you have to be her rock. You have to be her support system. And I am so glad that I can do that. But just between you and me, because she doesn't really watch the program all that often, sometimes it's a grind. Sometimes you can get a little down. And Steve, your email just hit me at just the right time. And it really did lift me up. And I thank you so much for that. The name of this program is Cam and Company, and you do all keep me company. And I greatly appreciate it. I have come to know so many of you through emails and in-person meetings. I'm hoping to see many of you at CPAC coming up here in just a few weeks in the Washington, D.C. area, at the NRA annual meeting in Nashville, Tennessee, coming up in just a couple of months. And again, you are always welcome to write. You are always welcome to tweet at me or message me on Twitter at Cam Edwards, because I do take the company part of this program seriously. And I thank you so much, Steve, for your support. And to everybody else who's reached out with your thoughts and your prayers and your kind words, please know that they matter. They do make a difference. And I thank you for your very good deed. That is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company. I hope you have a fantastic weekend. Thanks again for sharing part of today's program with me and spending some time with us. And we'll be back Monday. We'll have a full report on the latest with House Bill 961 in Virginia, Governor Northam's gun ban bill, magazine ban bill, suppressor ban bill, as well as some of the latest Second Amendment news and information from all across the nation. In the meantime, don't forget, you can subscribe to Bearing Arms Cam and Company at Spotify, Stitcher, townhall.com's podcast page, or Apple Podcasts. You can also subscribe to Town Hall Media at YouTube. And you can become a VIP member of BearingArms.com at BearingArms.com. Get exclusive commentary, analysis, and more. We certainly do appreciate your support. We'll see you soon with another edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company.